Welcome to Beyond the Numbers, the podcast where conversations about wealth go deeper. This isn't about flashy success or one-size-fits-all advice. It's about real people designing financial lives that align with who they are, what they value, and the legacies they're building. We bring together voices from business, finance, law, and leadership to talk about the moments that shape them and the strategies that sustain them. Here is your host, Chris Everett.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to Beyond the Numbers, where money meets meaning and purpose. Today's guest is a former U.S. Army Special Forces Green Beret, commander with 22 months of combat experience in Iraq and Afghanistan. He's the author of A Warrior's Mindset, 6 Keys to Greatness. He's also an executive coach at Novus Global, a speaker, and he hosts his own podcast called No Limit Leadership. He's a West Point graduate with an MBA from UNC Chapel Hill. He's a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt and co-owner of Legion Jiu-Jitsu out of Nashville. His focus? Transforming modern leadership into a driver of fulfillment, abundance, and freedom. And with all that said, please help me welcome Sean Patton. Welcome to Beyond the Numbers, Sean.
Oh, thank you for being here, Chris. Thanks for having me, Chris. And also, wow, an amazing intro, and one of the best pronunciations of jiu-jitsu I've heard from anyone that's attempted it. So that was really great.
Come on. If you're old enough, you know about jiu-jitsu. I'm just showing my age. Okay, listen. You know, you have an incredible journey from West Point to Special Forces to entrepreneurship. And so for listeners who just may not know your story, can you share what drew you to services in the Special Forces, number one, and then what that experience taught you about leadership under extreme pressure?
Well, I've been drawn to, I would say, leadership in general most of my life, like even back as a child and in high school. And I really saw the impact of that. I would say I got exposed to a professional level or a deeper level of leadership really at West Point. United States Military Academy is our nation's premier leadership institution. And it was there that I really discovered that leadership is, it's not like a secret set of skills or, something you just like study in a textbook or, a checklist that you follow 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and now you're a great leader. It really is about being. It's not about doing. And so, you learn at West Point, the first lesson is you have to learn how to lead yourself before you can effectively lead others. And so it really comes from this place of what is your character? What are your values? How well do you know yourself? How well are you able to regulate yourself? How well do you know what your vision is? Who are you? And I think that really set me off on a strong footing for leadership as a whole. And then through my time in Ranger School and in Iraq in the infantry, just sort of like each stage, right, just sort of builds on itself. And each experience allowed me to explore leadership and problems and myself and my own issues and my own self-limiting beliefs and push myself a little further and a little further until you get to a place like Army Special Forces and you step in as the Green Beret team commander of a 12-man ODA, and you're 28 years old and the youngest guy on the team.
So
and in
help
charge.
me to know what ODA means.
Yeah. Operational Attachment Alpha. So U.S. Army Special Forces, cool kind of quick lesson for a lot of listeners and in myself, I didn't know this before. If you're being technical, the sort of umbrella term would be special operations. So special operations is everything from Navy SEALs to Green Berets to Army Rangers to Night Stalkers to whatever. Those are all special operations. If you say special forces, technically, you're talking about Army Special Forces, or otherwise known as the Green Berets. And Green Berets primarily operate in ODAs or teams, 12-man teams.
These become your brothers, don't they?
Oh, yeah, very quickly. And one thing that I honestly took for granted in the military at every level, but especially when you get to that level, is, because everyone has volunteered for the same service and then gone through multiple layers of filtering. By the time you get there, it's not that you show up, you just met this person and they're kind of a stranger and all of a sudden, they're like your best friend and you trust them implicitly, but you kind of do. You kind of show up and you have your best friend, but like you start with, I trust you with my life because of our common background. And, I always say everything in life is a filter. And so, and good and bad filters. And so you can use that as a tool with what filters do you put yourself through, right? Like when you look at your circle and the people you hang out with and their influence around you, and it's like, what are they doing with their lives? What filters are they putting themselves through? And if you want to be around other people, or if you have a vision for who you're trying to become or the life you're trying to create, put yourself through the filters that naturally weed out the people who don't fit that vision. And that's kind of what the Army does in multiple levels. And you've gone through a pretty tight filter by the time you've got to a Special Forces ODA.
Yeah, I get it completely. Well, I don't know, I get it completely, but yeah, that's a very helpful explanation. And also, you have to perform at a level of authenticity like no other, I would imagine.
Yeah, you really have to be, vulnerable. And that's where trust is built. And so there's this expectation and a culture that's created there. And I work with a lot of organizations and businesses. I work with wealth managers. I work with a lot of folks. And a lot of them will talk about this culture that they're trying to create. And they want to have a trust, or they want to have feedback, or they want to have those types of things. And it really starts with the fact, well, I'll say two things. One, if you are a leader in a formal position or not, but a person of influence in an organization, you want to impact culture, trust and respect has to go down in an organization before it ever comes back up.
Absolutely. We call ours a culture of honor. We intentionally make sure that we honor our clientele. But before we even get to clients, we have to honor each other. It has to be part of our culture through and through. Yeah.
It really does. And then you live that, exactly. You live that trust and respect, and you live that with being direct, with trusting each other, being vulnerable and being direct. Hey, and go first, right? Leaders go first. So here's my mistakes. Here's how I did wrong. Here's what else do you see? And ask for real feedback, like that's such a huge component of leadership and of really just strong relationships is, I'll tell you this, what I see that doesn't work, that leaders cop out on is, well, I've got an open door policy. Like they know they can talk to me if something's wrong, right? Like if something comes up, they know that they can bring this up to me, or they'll report it on their report or whatever.
But it's not modeled, right?
Yeah, it's not. It's not modeled, and it's not regular. So what works much better inside of, you talk about honoring your clients or honoring the people in your office or even a relationship, is going first and say, here's the thing, every time we meet, or if you're in an office, every month we're going to sit down. I'm going to tell you 3 things that I think you can do better, and 3 things that you did great, and you're going to do the same to me. No matter what, you're going to find 3 things that you think I can do better, because now you've lubricated the mechanism of feedback so that it will naturally come out, and it's not kind of on the shelf like, oh yeah, we'll pull that off the shelf if we need it.
I think delayed gratification, delayed correction is a mistake. So my staff has full permission to call me on my stuff anytime they need to, as I do for them. And we do it in real time, because that's when we learn. We don't have special time of year where they're going to get an assessment. No, they know how they're doing all the time. And I know how I'm doing. So, yeah. Let's talk about military to entrepreneurship. So many veterans struggle with the transition from military service to civilian business life. You made that leap to business and built successful companies. So what was that transition like for you? And not only financially, but also emotionally. And how did you navigate the uncertainty of leaving a structured military career to become an entrepreneur? We're talking night and day stuff here, aren't we?
Yes. And I would say there's a few questions there. I would say in terms of the military transition, what I can say I struggle with personally and through observation and through relationships can say is an almost ubiquitous experience are 2 things. One, the lack of purpose and mission. The sense, you've had this strong sense of purpose and mission that's just been given to you, literally in writing. Like, here is your mission statement, right? Like, it's right there. This is what I do, and this is why it matters. And everyone knows what it is, and it's very clear. And then in the civilian world, when you step out, you have to create that for yourself. And for a lot of people, that is and myself included, that's a struggle. And the second thing is identity. So this is true for, I think, for anyone in major life transition, or can be true for anyone in a major life transition. But so many people in the service, again, myself included, from 3 weeks out of high school, I went to West Point. So I went from my parents' house to the barracks room. And by the time I was 32. So my entire young adult life, all those key developmental years, were I am a soldier, I'm an officer, I'm a Green Beret, I'm this person, and that's my identity. And it's a very crazy feeling when you, as an officer, let's just say, you went from, when I walked in this morning, I had a Green Beret on, so they know that I'm a Green Beret. They see combat patches. You've got your resume on your chest, right? I've got I got a Special Forces Combat Diver badge. I've got, Bronze Stars. I got all this stuff. And you walk in and you get saluted as you come on base. And then you give your ID up, you walk out in a polo, and you can't even walk back in the door. And that is now you're just another dude walking around in a polo. Right?
So, but what I'm hearing is that you think that's who you are, but that's what you do.
Yes. And I think that you pointed a great string here, Chris, is that so many people's identity is tied to what they do. And I'll do this with clients. Well, I'll sit down and we'll do some work and like, okay, who are you outside of not just job roles, but relationships? Because this can happen for a lot of reasons, right? Like, this can happen if you have, let's just say you have, any parent, but say it's very strong for say you have a stay-at-home mom who has been taking care of her kids, and her value and her identity is like, these people need me. I'm the mom. And then they all leave and they go off to college, and it's like, who am I? Because I guess I'm still their mom, but I'm not. That's not my role anymore. Or you retire as an educator or whatever it might be. So there is it's not that it's wrong to be proud of what you do and to put light and breathe life into what you do, but I'll do an exercise was like, can you describe yourself in 3 words of who you are outside of any relationship or business role you have? And most people, and myself included, when I first did that exercise, really struggled with, like, if I took you into an island or a foreign country and you don't have family, you don't have job, you're just you're just Chris, you're just Sean, you're just whoever in the middle of the sea of people. Who are you now? And the clearer you can be on that, the more resilient you'll be when the external circumstances around you change.
Yeah. And I think that's very true. So I know, not that this is going to be therapy, but I know that I'm a child of God. I don't care where I'm at on the planet. And I know that is secure. That's my identity, period. Now, I love to talk. I love to sing. I love to be a financial planner and help my clients. But if all of that stopped, I could retool and do something else completely, because I know who I am. I think that education is missing that piece. And I don't even know if it's education's place to teach that, but society needs it more. Don't you think?
I think so. And I think this is a great, I'm a leadership junkie, and I like that term. Psych is a place where leaders of any kind, and I think that could be an educator. I think it could be a coach. I think it could be clergy. I think it should be parents, right? It should be people like that, friends that can help reflect back and not, give identity or tell someone what to think, but to invite them into conversation and exploration on how to think about themselves and who they really are. And also, to a certain extent, I think that we can define ourselves and take it as this has to be in stone. But as we go through different seasons of life, as we learn, as we grow as people, as we make mistakes and we learn from them, hopefully we're getting better, wiser, more in tune with who we are as we age, as we get life experience. So I think it's also important to realize that this is a journey, not a destination. And it's okay to be like, hey, at this checkpoint in life, this is what I'm thinking. This is where I'm at. but I'm staying curious. I'm staying open. I'm taking in new information. I'm reassessing, and I'm giving myself permission to grow and transform into new versions of myself moving forward.
You make me smile because I'm thinking about how we think about ourselves, but then we should ask other people too what they think.
100%.
So let's go back to talk to me about the transition then from being in the service, and thank you again for your service. I know you've said that to you before. I didn't say it today, but thank you. Talk to me about the transition from that very structured place you were at to then becoming an entrepreneur with no holes barred. How the hey did that go?
It was a huge struggle, and I think it can be different for different people. For me, I can just speak to my experience. The hardest lesson I had to learn, and I learned it in almost the hardest way you could, is that over those 14 years of service, the answer when things got hard was usually go harder, right? Like keep marching, no matter what happens. It's like, and I would been put in so many, whether it was in training or in combat or wherever else, where it's like, this, you are cold, wet, hungry, tired, exhausted, feel defeated, whatever else. And the answer to the test is put one foot in front of the other, keep going, just keep pushing, because eventually the mission ends. Eventually the training ends. Eventually you redeploy and refit. Like all those things happen. And what I didn't appreciate until I got to reflect back later through my own experiences, was that while I was in the military, you're doing that and your head is down in the mission so much that you don't realize that there's sort of this protective bubble around you that's setting the conditions for that. That is,
well, and everybody else is doing it too.
Yeah,
right?
Yes, everybody else is doing it too. And there's like an apparatus to support you to say, hey, now is your time to rest. Now is your time. Hey, you just deployed for a few months or 6 months or whatever. Like take 30 days. Here's a counselor. Here's this. And you're around other people doing it. And there's also the support system that is specifically set up to turn you into like the Lamborghini, right? Like you're just like this, you're this high charged, highly driven machine that is capable to a level that almost none of humanity is, to like your mind now pushes past what your body is capable of. Like you go to the gym and a lot of people run really fast, but you don't see that many people who just keep running until their legs just give out and they fly off the back of the treadmill, right? Their mind quits first. They're like, I'm tired. I'm going to stop. This is a normal self-preservation thing. And you get sort of trained out of that in that environment because the mission comes before your own self-preservation. And so what I found when I got out and I went to entrepreneurship was, I said, look at all the things I've done. I've accomplished. I also had recently got back from a pretty violent deployment in Afghanistan. And I think that my sort of baseline level of operation was just pinging so high that was my new normal. And I hadn't really dealt with that mentally. And so I hopped right in and I was a full-time MBA student and I was starting a business with zero business or industry experience. And then when the conditions changed and the capital requirements doubled, I didn't blink. I went out and pitched to a bank, and this bank gave me $600,000 loan, even though I had no business experience. I had no business getting this loan, but because of my background and how I pitched, I just like got it. And I just kept going. And then even though in my intuition, I saw how I was sort of like digging myself into what to a rational person looks like an unwinnable situation, my answer was keep moving forward. And so I kept doing that, and I kept doing that to the point where by the time I had figured out the operational things and I had a successful business, I had a gym that was doing 47 grand a month in gross revenue and still losing money because I had gotten so over leveraged and had signed a lease deal that I shouldn't have and made these early financial decisions. And I just pushed myself literally into the hospital. And so this refining yourself and pushing yourself that hard comes with a bit of a double edge. And so that's where
there's no off button.
There's no
right?
off button. And reflecting back now, and I still struggle with this, is going back to identity. For me, my biggest motivator was not to be seen as a failure. To be seen as someone who
That's
fails.
a heavy lift, honey. That's a heavy lift.
To be seen as a failure was worse than death. And so I pushed myself to that point. And so 3 years after I got out, I went from talk about an identity shift of, Captain America, Green Beret Commander, West Point grad, like everything you just listed on my resume, to filing for bankruptcy and Venmoing, asking for a Venmo for my girlfriend so I could buy some groceries at a grocery store.
Wow.
And
humbling,
very humbling. And I learned a lot of lessons about business. I was forced to learn a lot of lessons about myself. And I got some other partners, and I had to earn back into my equity because I had no money to buy in. But I built our next company over the next 3 years it became Lead Jiu-Jitsu in multiple locations. And now even we sold one of our locations, but we have over 500 active students, and we're a multi-million-dollar valuated company, and it runs itself, and it's changing lives and all those things. But it was a journey.
You know what, though? I think failures are underappreciated. I know I failed, and I thank God for my failure. And so some of the parents that I work with, I'm like, let the kid fall. Because if you could really learn how to fall when you're a kid or a teenager, makes it a hell of a lot easier when you're older.
That is such a good point. And, I always say, if there are any young people listening or people that have kids that are this age, maybe there are, right? Or people with kids or teenagers, whenever I have that conversation with them, even young professionals, I say there's sort of like 3 skill sets, if you want to call them that, really separate, that lift the cap on someone's potential in life and professionally. And for me, it's sales, public speaking, and leadership. It's like, can you persuade someone of an idea, of a thing, convince them that something has value, sales, right? And then it's like, well, you can do that with one person. Can you now, if you really want to have a greater impact, you've got to do it to many. So can you persuade many? Are you comfortable doing that? Public speaking, right? And then the final part of that is, okay, now they're all on board with you. What are you going to do now? Now you have to lead them toward a greater vision and mission. And sort of like everything else can be learned, right? Like everything else is like a skill. You could just like take some classes and do stuff. But if you get those things become the limiting variable. And to your point, every one of those to get better requires failure and pushing yourself over and over again and learning, right? And that's the basis of all 3 of those acts, is just repetition and the willingness to try again.
And I think for as much basketball and baseball and football that our country watches, you would think more people would understand that, right?
Yeah, 100%. 100%. And I think that's why the value, right, in athletics, and particularly some athletics, where learning how to overcome those failures and you mentioned, you talk with the parents you work with and their kids, like, it's okay to put them, to have them be challenged and to have them lose the game and have them lose the position and have them lose, because how they respond from that is going to be the thing that builds their character.
Well, I also go back to those little eggs when they want to come out of their shell. If you try to open up the shell, you're going to kill them. You got to let them struggle.
I love that.
Get stronger and stronger.
I like that analogy. Yeah, that's a beautiful
one. Right? All right. So your book, The Warrior's Mindset, The 6 Keys to Greatness, emphasizes contentment, fulfillment, and legacy creation, which I happen to really like. In my work as a financial advisor, I see many successful people who have accumulated significant wealth and they still feel unfulfilled. So what do you see as the disconnect between financial success and true fulfillment? I guess we kind of touched on some of that already.
I believe, right? Well, I don't believe. I have a pretty strong belief, because I think I know that we are tribal creatures, right? We are social creatures. If you isolate a human being from other human beings, they become like mentally unstable. Like we didn't rise to the top of the food chain because we're the biggest, the fastest, the strongest. It's that because we communicated and worked and contributed to this group in different ways. And we all played a different role. And so we created a situation, right? We have the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. And that's why I'm so passionate about leadership, because I think that's what facilitates that. And so to tie that back to your question, it would be that while you can gain security through financial accumulation or things or whatever, like that is great. But true fulfillment will never come from what I would call selfish gratification, if it's just about you. So if you have wealth or money or resources of any kind, time, whatever that might be, and you keep it to yourself and your little fiefdom, you'll never have fulfillment. But if you create a positive impact on other people, and you have a purpose, a greater purpose, a noble purpose greater than yourself that you're striving toward, and you can leverage those resources, whether that's wealth or time or something else, toward that noble purpose greater than yourself, you will find fulfillment.
Yeah. Yeah. I like it. I like it. So you say in your book that it's about achieving maximum fulfillment and impact. So for someone listening who might be financially comfortable, but feeling lost or without purpose, what would be your first piece of guidance? Where do they start to find that fulfillment?
I would say,
is there an audit? Is there a test to take?
Yeah. I mean, so I would say start.
Right? A box to check?
Yeah. I think where people can get lost on this is they look too broad and too wide. And what I have found for myself and for others is that look in your immediate vicinity. Look in who in your family, who in your immediate community, in your church, in your business, in your organization. Where can you make an impact closest to you? And often that impact will be deeper and more meaningful, and you can participate in it. And that's a much different experience than, oh, I wrote a check for someone in, another continent. That feels great, but there's a proximity principle that applies here as human beings, right? There's a reason, and this is kind of a less altruistic turn, but there's a phrase that basically people care more about their own toothache than they do a famine in Africa. It's closer to you. And that's just who we are as human beings. So start close to you. And the other thing I would say is that it's also proportional to effort. So yeah, you could writing a check is great. That's awesome. That's phenomenal. But I'm not sure if that's going to be the same fulfillment as sitting down and volunteering 4 hours of your time.
Yeah, true enough. I mean, because you see the impact immediately on your effort. You don't always see what happens with that check.
Yeah. And you don't see it. You don't know a lot of times what happens with that check.
Yeah. All right. So one of your core messages is mission first, people always, which is lovely. For business owners and leaders listening who may be focused primarily on profit maximization, how do you balance the financial imperatives of running a business with investing in people and purpose?
That's a great question, Chris. So the mission has to come first, because you have to know why this company exists. Like, what is the impact you're trying to have? What is the problem that you solve? Because then you organize the company, the culture around accomplishing that mission. And a very simple example would be if you're at a creative arts graphic design firm and you're at a microchip engineering firm, those are going to be different cultures. Like the optimal culture at each one of those places is going to be very different. So you have to know like what the purpose of the organization is, the mission. The mission comes first. That's how we make decisions. But we have to look at how do we do that and do it in a way that develops our people? How do we do that in a way that lifts our people up? Like a dual purpose, right? A dual purpose of this organization. Because it is I like to, sometimes I'm going to run this to like an extreme. I think if you take a philosophy or an idea and you run it to like its extreme version, then you start to see where some of the initial cracks were in it. Okay. So if you said it's just profit, not people, I don't care, and that's all that matters, basically run a drug cartel, right? Like you could run something that destroys humanity, destroys the environment, but you make a bunch of money. And is that what you want to create? Like, is that your legacy you want to create? Is that who you are as a human being? And so that's an extreme version. So when you pull that back a bit, it's like, well, that's not how I want to be. Okay. What do you want to do? Well, I want to be a place that, and in those values, in that culture, we impact the world in this way. We solve this problem and we make the lives of everyone we touch better. And how can we do that? And how can we, and what I found in organizations that do this well, these organizations are more resilient and ultimately more sustainable. Because if you are running an organization that just burns through people and doesn't take into account, especially these days, right? Like everyone, there's Glassdoor, there's all these, like people know if you have a crappy place to work at and how you treat your people. And then you have the inherent costs that come, right? Maybe you squeak out a little more earnings in this quarter, but you chase out, or you have to get rid of a bunch of people in your company because they're being treated bad or not well compensated or not supported in a certain way. And now when the next turn comes, you got to go find more people, right? And that's costly. And so when you have a sustained company that has the mission in mind, but is always taking care of like, how do we lift up and build capacity in our people? Over time, that company, when you have a company that is moving forward and has a mission and is also taking care of its people, not burning them out, not running them out and then having to rehire or train and bring in outside people, like that is all costly. So it all feeds to the bottom line. It's expensive. It's unknown. I mean, this is kind of an extreme example, but again, I think that it works. Like look at the companies or even the towns during COVID that said, well, we're scared, mission, whatever. And we're going to like, we're kicking everybody out, or we're getting rid of our workforce and we're shrinking down. And then as soon as they had to rebound, they were way behind. There were some companies that said, hey, guess what we're all going to do? We're all going to take a 20% pay cut, executives included. And we're going to keep everybody. We're going to remember that. And then as soon as the conditions changed, they were on it and they took over. So a resilient company is a company that its people want to be there, right? Like the engagement level, because a body in a seat is not the same as a person who is passionate about mission, and you will never get more than just enough. If someone is just there to, as a transactional thing, I show up, I do this thing, you give me money, you will only get in proportion to what they have to do in order to keep that job. But when someone really buys in to the team, to the organization, to the mission, you get the best of people.
And it's so true. I have 2 staff that work for me that used to be clients first. So they already knew what the culture was like. So when they came to work here, they got it. And sometimes we fight like cats and dogs. It doesn't matter. We know what the mission is, and we stay on mission. Yeah. Good stuff. You emphasize character development as foundational to leadership, right? So in the financial world, we often see people making money decisions that conflict with their stated values. So how do you help leaders align their financial choices with their character and the legacy that they want to create?
I love this question because what I'm hearing from you is that there's vision, right? Like what they want to create with the future they're trying to build. And then in coaching world, we talk about vision, strategy, and mindset. And so when those things are aligned, you move forward seamlessly, you move forward with less stress, you have integrity as a human being. And integrity not in a moral sense, not in a like right or wrong, just in alignment or out of alignment, right? Like if a bridge has integrity, it means all of its parts are functioning together and you can drive across it safely. If you have a bridge that's out of integrity, right, then you have the parts are not aligned. The suspension, I don't know anything about bridges. Yes, I should use a different example. The suspension cords. Yeah. When those things are out of alignment, then the whole thing becomes unstable. And human beings are no different. And so when we are out of integrity and we have stated values, or we have a vision, but our mindset or our being don't align with it, or our strategy doesn't align with vision, then when we're out of integrity, we're not efficient, where we will feel tension and stress and anxiety and a lack of fulfillment. And we will feel that tension inside ourselves. And so if you see someone, or if you are someone maybe who has this vision for what you want to create, or you have a stated values and you have your money that doesn't follow, I would explore the mindset around what would it feel like to have integrity? Like, what would it feel like to be a person who does what they say when they say they're going to do it, both with their finances and with their actions? And how is that experience of life different? And then you have to make a choice. What kind of experience of life do you want to have?
I think it's good that people get uncomfortable when that's in place, though, don't you? Otherwise, they would never even want to do anything about it. So look, on your podcast, you talk about self-leadership as the foundation for leading others. From a financial planning perspective, self-leadership often means delayed gratification, disciplined savings, and resisting lifestyle inflation. So what parallels do you see between the discipline required for self-leadership and the discipline required for long-term financial success?
I mean, they're virtually the same, right? Like self-discipline. And I actually was just doing some study and reading and watching actually some of my old speeches because I was putting some content together and actually wrote this down. So it's just, this wasn't planned. I just wrote it down on my paper as you brought up, self-discipline. And this is the line from my when my book launched and I give my book launch speech, and I was going back and through and getting clips. And the line from that speech is, self-discipline is rooted in the reverence and love for every single moment in life.
Oh, that's incredible. And it's so true. Thank you for that. So you warn about immediate gratification and emphasize playing the long game. In a culture that promotes instant results, whether that's day trading, crypto speculation, or get-rich-quick schemes, how do you help people develop patience, and resilience for sustainable success?
I think that there's this concept of a gap in coaching when I work with clients. And you have this gap between current reality, where you're at, and desired future state, right? You want this future state, you're in current reality. Exactly. And you have this gap. And the beautiful thing is you get to choose how you relate to that gap. So that gap can be depressing. That gap can be anxiety inducing. That gap could be seen, you could view it as a negative thing that you don't have the thing that you want right now. You can also love the gap. You can love the fact that you're growing. You can love the fact that you're doing the work. You can love the fact that through your efforts of closing that gap, you are becoming a better human being, that your life is getting better, that you're living in alignment. And you can look at it as a gift, growth and ownership as a gift by living in that gap. And that's simply a decision on how you want that to occur to you. What lens do you want to put on?
I love that so much. It's so, they say that no one likes change. I actually like change. Well, sometimes I don't, but mostly I do. Because I know without change, you're stagnating. And so, no, I love the way you put that. So you say that you want people to see themselves the way, I see them. Powerful, with unlimited potential. Many people have limiting beliefs about money that hold them back. And what's one practical exercise or mindset shift you recommend for someone who wants to unlock their financial and personal potential and, really see that there are these amazing, unlimited potential people? We all are. I know that in my core.
And there's so many different ways I could go with this. So that's a great question. So let's talk, like, you have this limiting belief, right? About maybe what you're capable of or I struggle with this to fully out myself around, I grew up with a single mom, not a lot of money. And my mom was here for my son's first birthday recently. And I even, told her, not in a bad way, just in a revealing way. Even to this day, she still has this sort of belief. And I was raised where we would drive around and see big houses or see people with money, or I'd have friends. And it was very much a discussion around these people just have things. Like, certain people just have money, and there's people who don't have money, and we're those type of people and they're their type of people. And there's also this sort of underlying inclination that people who have money did it in a negative way. Either they sacrificed their values by doing, bad work, or they took advantage of others, or something like that. There's an underlying current of that inside of my own money and wealth story. So I can totally...
I think a lot of people grow up that way, unfortunately. It's not true.
That's not true, yeah. And then you get to know, and you're like, these wealthy people are the most generous, hardworking, family-focused people I've ever met. Not all of them, right? But there's, you just realize that that's independent of the money question. And so what I would, if you ask for an exercise, what I would do is say, okay, what is that belief that you have? Okay. So let's just say the belief is, well, there's just certain people who just have money and people who don't. I'm not one of those people. And then what do you do when you believe that? Well, when I believe that, a lot, that people that just have money.
You're a victim.
I'm a victim. It's not worth really trying. Why save money? Because it's not going to happen for me anyway. I might as well get the shiny thing I want right now, or I'm unhappy, or I'm sad, or I feel bad about myself, or whatever. Whatever that is, right? Like, it can be different for people. This is just one example. You could use it with any belief, by the way. Okay. And what are the payoffs? Like, there's a reason that you perpetuate this belief, right? And
that's good.
And that payoff could be, well, it makes me feel better about my own situation. It lets myself off.
I don't have to change, right?
I don't have to work harder.
I can't change.
I don't have to do that because I can just let myself off the hook. And that feels good because the weight of sitting in the way I relate to this gap is uncomfortable. So I get to avoid all that. And that could be a payoff. And then you say, okay, what are the costs of that? Well, the costs are, I don't have money for retirement. The costs are, I don't feel good about myself. The costs are, I don't try harder. The cost is, I can't provide whatever for my family. I don't have financial freedom. I can't see what you can just list them off, right? And then the question is, now that you look at the payoffs and costs in real time, like write them out, do you want to keep the belief or not? Do you want to make a new choice? Because that belief is a choice. That is not objectively true. That is a choice of a lens that you're choosing to occur and engage with the world. What could be a new belief that would better serve your resource moving forward? And then try that belief on. And here's the thing is that occurrence of the world is rooted in our language. So if we start using different words to ourselves and we start trying on new mindsets, it changes, going back to our original conversation about leadership and way of being, it changes who you are at a being level. And then you start making different decisions and different actions that better align with that way of being and the vision that you're trying to create.
And it takes more than just positive self-talk, doesn't it?
Yeah, it takes action. It takes action on that, right? And so we have to try that on and hold that accountable. But that's why going through this, very synopsis of like, what's the complaint? Okay, what's the belief? What do I do because of that? What's the payoff? What's the cost? And weigh those two. And if maybe you say, yeah, I don't really care. It's not worth it for me. Well, that's your decision. Like that, everyone has free will. But most of the time when you actually look that out, what happens is the payoffs are all short term, to your point, and the costs are long term. But when you lay them out, the costs are much heavier than the short little payoffs. It's just that these are closer to you in time and impact. But if you lay them all out and you look at them objectively, you can make a more informed decision and then be intentional with your approach to your own mindset and your own actions. And then you align person and being and vision, going back to vision, strategy, and mindset. You align those on whatever you want your new belief to be. And then over time, you become that person.
Good stuff, Sean. So as we wrap up, you emphasize legacy creation also. So when you think about the legacy that you want to leave, not just financially, but in terms of impact, what does that look like? And how can listeners start thinking more intentionally about their own legacy today?
So close to me now as like a new father, as I'm very much thinking about legacy in terms of my family and providing let me first say, like, again, privileged upbringing. My mother's amazing human being. And we didn't have much growing up, but I'm very privileged and I am very grateful for what we did have. And because of that, I was able to do things like go to West Point, like statistically, I was born to a unwed college dropout mom in the early 80s. Statistically, I would have more likely ended up in prison than West Point. And it's because of her efforts and, my own decisions that didn't happen. And that has allowed me now to be in a position where with my son and my legacy, it's like, what can I provide to him? Things like I didn't get to travel. I didn't have a worldly perspective. I was limited in a lot of those experiences. And so I get to pass on new mindsets and new perspectives to my immediate family. So that's like the immediate legacy that comes to mind. But on a larger scale, I have such a strong belief that the journey to becoming the leader you're capable of is the path to becoming the greatest version of yourself. And that when you shift your own identity to not just, I'm a person who does this job and I have a family, like when you shift that to like, I am a leader of myself. Like when you think of just like a manager and a leader, you're thinking of a different human being. And so when you think of yourself, I know I'm a leader of myself first, and I'm a leader of my family, and I'm a leader of my community, and I'm a leader of my business, and I'm a leader with my money, and I'm going to make impact with that. And I step up in that. You start holding yourself to a higher standard of being. It's a higher state of being. And you start making different decisions and different actions. And so I'm so passionate about that, I have a personal, to put it in quantifiable numbers, I have a personal goal of getting 1 million people to commit to becoming the leader that they're capable of in their lives.
That's good. I love it. I love it. And I know you'll do it too.
Yeah.
I mentioned it before.
Exactly. Yeah.
Oh, Sean, thanks so much for joining us today. So listen, everyone, go to nolimitsleadership.net for more information about Sean, and grab a copy of his book, A Warrior's Mindset, The 6 Keys to Greatness. You can get it on Amazon. He also has a podcast called No Limits Leadership. You can find him on LinkedIn, Sean Patton, or No Limit Leaders. I just want to thank you so much for what you gave today, and so authentically and so just so openly and willingly. And so thanks for joining us again today on Beyond the Numbers. I hope you'll like and subscribe, share this episode with someone who's looking for a coach, someone who could really take value from this awesome conversation that Sean gave us today. Have a great day, everyone. See you next time on Beyond the Numbers.
Beyond the Numbers podcast requires more than a conversation. It takes action, research, and collective wisdom. If today's episode resonated with you, we'd love to hear your insights. Join the conversation and help us shape the future together. We'll be back with more stories, strategies, and real-world solutions that are making a difference for everyone. In the meantime, be sure to subscribe, rate, write a review, and share it with someone you think would benefit from it too. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you on the next episode.